The mirror in our bedroom at the end of the hall in Oak Creek has a crack in the bottom left corner, a jagged little lightning bolt that I've meant to fix for 3 years. Today, as I stood before it, that crack seemed to slice right through my reflection, severing my head from my shoulders. It felt appropriate. I didn't feel like a whole man. I felt like a collection of fragments held together by sheer willpower and a mortgage I was paying off in total secrecy. I reached for the suit jacket draped over the back of our single mismatched chair. It was a charcoal gray number I'd bought for a job interview back in 2021. Back then, it felt like armor. It represented a new beginning. Now it felt like a costume that had been washed one too many times. The fabric was thin, the polyester blend catching the light in a way that screamed, budget rack, and the shoulders, once sharp and hopeful, now slouched as if they were as tired as the man wearing them. I slid my arms into the sleeves. The silk imitation lining was torn at the armpit, a secret scratchiness that only I would feel all day. Every move I made would be a reminder of the friction between the life I was living and the one Clara demanded. I tugged at the cuffs, trying to coax them to meet my wrists, but they retreated, revealing my cheap stainless steel watch. This suit wasn't just an outfit, it was a physical manifestation of every sacrifice I'd made. Every overtime shift I'd taken that Clara didn't know about, every lunch I'd skipped to put an extra $20 into the high-yield account, it was all hidden behind this threadbare gray cloth. And I was struggling with my tie, a flat, uninspired navy blue, when the door swung open. The scent hit me first. Jardin de Nuit. It cost $400 a bottle. Clara wore it like a weapon. She processed into the room draped in emerald silk that flowed around her legs like water. Her hair was pinned back in a sleek updo that probably cost more than my entire car. She stopped dead in the center of the rug, her eyes narrowing as they landed on me. "You're actually wearing that?" she whispered, her voice dripping with a cold, sharp poison. "At my sister's wedding? You look like a debt collector who failed at his job. Don't stand too close to me today, Elias. I have a reputation to maintain, even if you've given up on yours." The sting wasn't just in the words, it was in the realization that I was solo in a partnership I thought was a duo. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. I picked up my keys, the metal cold against my palm, and realized that today wasn't just about a wedding. It was the day the fabric of my marriage finally started to rip at the seams. The drive from Oak Creek to the Sterling Heights estate usually takes 45 minutes, but today every mile felt like a marathon. The air conditioning in my 2014 sedan was struggling against the humid Georgia heat, wheezing a thin stream of lukewarm air that did nothing to stop the beads of sweat from forming under my polyester collar. I could feel the moisture starting to wilt the starch in my shirt, another small defeat in a morning full of them. Clara sat in the passenger seat, perched on the edge as if she were afraid the upholstery might contaminate her dress. She held a small gold-leafed hand fan, fluttering it rhythmically. The silence was a physical thing, thick and suffocating. "You know," she said, not looking at me, "Marcus offered to lend you one of his old tuxedos. I told him no. I told him you were too proud to accept charity." "I'm not too proud for charity, Clara," I replied, keeping my eyes fixed on the asphalt. "I'm just not interested in wearing a dead man's skin. Marcus has never liked me. Wearing his hand-me-downs would have given him a lead for the rest of the night to tug on. I'd rather be poor in my own clothes than a puppet in his." "At least it would have been a lead made of Italian wool," she snapped, her voice rising in pitch. "Instead, you chose to humiliate me. Do you enjoy it? Do you enjoy being the poor relation at the table? It's like you're trying to punish me for having aspirations. You think your frugality is a virtue, but it's just a cage you've built for both of us." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. She had no idea. She saw the poor suit, but she didn't see the $140,000 sitting in an account under my mother's maiden name. She didn't see the 3 years of driving this rattling car, all so that one day we wouldn't just look rich, we would be secure. But as she sat there complaining about the aesthetics of my poverty, I realized that "we" was a word that no longer applied. I was building a future for a woman who was already looking for the exit. As we pulled into the gates of the Sterling Heights estate, the transition was jarring. We left the cracked pavement of the county road and entered a world of perfectly manicured gravel and ancient oaks draped in Spanish moss. The driveway was a mile long, lined with valets in white gloves. I pulled my rattling sedan up to the curb, the engine giving one final, shuddering gasp before I cut the ignition. Julianne, the bride, was standing near the grand staircase inside. She was a younger, sharper version of Clara, a woman who viewed people as stepping stones. When she saw Clara, she let out a theatrical gasp. "Oh, sister, you look acceptable. That green really does wonders for your complexion." Then her eyes slid to me. It wasn't a glance. It was an inspection. She walked a slow circle around me, her heels clicking like a ticking clock on the marble floor. Marcus, her fiancé, stood behind her in a midnight blue tuxedo with silk lapels that caught every ray of light in the room. "Elias," Marcus said, his voice a rehearsed baritone, "I see you went with a classic look. Very 1990s middle management. I didn't know Sears was still in business." The bridesmaids, a flock of women in matching champagne silk, erupted into a chorus of giggles. Julianne leaned in, her voice a stage whisper. "Don't be mean, Marcus. Elias is a working man. He probably thinks this suit is practical. You can wear it to a funeral, a court date, or, apparently, the most important day of my life." I looked at Clara, waiting for her to say something. Anything. Instead, she laughed. "I told him," Clara said, taking a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "I told him it was an embarrassment. But he likes to play the martyr. He wants everyone to see how hard he works by showing up in rags." Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. If you were standing in my shoes, hearing your own wife join in on your public humiliation, would you have stayed for the ceremony? Or would you have handed the car keys to the valet and walked into the night? The ceremony was held in the Sunken Garden, a natural amphitheater of white roses and stone benches. I was relegated to the third row, tucked behind a large floral arrangement that smelled so strongly of lilies it made my eyes water. Clara, of course, was in the front row, seated next to her father, Arthur, acting as the dutiful, high society daughter. As the string quartet played, I sat perfectly still. The sun was beating down, and the cheap fabric of my suit was beginning to trap the heat, making me feel like I was being slowly steamed inside my own skin. I watched Marcus and Julianne exchange vows. They spoke of legacy and unlimited resources. It wasn't a wedding, it was a corporate merger. Arthur, my father-in-law, turned his head slightly and caught my eye. He didn't smile. He just looked at my suit, then at the shiny scuff on my shoe, and gave a single, slow shake of his head. I looked down at my hands. They were calloused from the extra work I did on the weekends. Work Clara thought was beneath us. Those calluses were the reason I had 6 figures in the bank. Those calluses were the reason I didn't owe a dime to Marcus or Arthur. As the crowd erupted into polite applause, I made a vow of my own. I wasn't going to buy a new suit for the reception. I was going to wait. I was going to watch. And when the time was right, I was going to show them that the man in the simple suit was the only one in the garden who actually owned himself. The ballroom was a masterpiece of excess. Gold-leafed pillars rose 20 feet to meet a ceiling painted with faux Renaissance clouds. I found my name at table 22, tucked in the far back corner near the kitchen doors. I was positioned perfectly so that every time a waiter emerged with a tray of lobster tails, a draft of cold air hit the back of my neck. Clara was seated at the head table, laughing with a man I recognized from business journals, a venture capitalist with a tan that looked like it cost more than my rent. She hadn't even looked for me. My companions were a sleeping great aunt and 2 distant cousins who were more interested in their Instagram feeds than in human interaction. The waiter arrived with truffle-infused crostini. As I reached out, the fraying thread on my cuff caught the edge of his silver tray. I heard the tiny snag. The waiter didn't say anything, but his eyes flickered down to the thread and then up to my face. I was a glitch in the matrix of their perfect evening. I ate the crostini. It tasted like nothing. My mind was already back in my home office, looking at the spreadsheet that was my real life. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. Is it the way the family treats me? No, or the way Clara has completely abandoned our partnership for the sake of a seat at the high table? About an hour into the dinner, while the main course was being served, a cut of Wagyu beef that probably cost $100 an ounce, Arthur made his rounds. He approached table 22 and stopped, his shadow falling over my plate like a dark cloud. "Elias," he said, his voice like grinding stones. "You look comfortable." "I am, Arthur. The chair is sturdy, and the view of the kitchen is fascinating." He leaned in, the scent of expensive bourbon radiating off him. "Appearances matter in this family. People are wondering if my daughter married a man who can't provide. I've had 3 different partners ask me who the security guard in the back is. It reflects poorly on me, and it reflects poorly on my business." He slid a crisp $100 bill across the white linen. "Go to the bar, buy yourself a real drink, and for God's sake, try to stay out of the photos. We'll talk Monday about getting you a loan to get your feet under you. I can't have my son-in-law looking like a vagrant at a Sterling event." I picked up the bill, folded it neatly, and handed it back to him. "Keep it, Arthur. Use it to pay the valet to keep my car out of sight. I prefer to pay my own way." He turned a deep shade of crimson and walked away without another word. By 11 p.m., the formal dinner had dissolved into a den of high society hedonism. I stood by the glass doors, watching Clara dance with Preston, one of Marcus's business associates. Preston had his hand a little too low on Clara's waist, and she was leaning into him. He flushed with champagne and the thrill of being the center of attention. I walked over to her. "Clara, it's late. We should head back. It's a long drive and we both have work tomorrow." She turned to me, her eyes glazed and cold. "Go home, Elias. I'm not ready to leave. Preston said he'd drop me off. Or maybe I'll just stay at the estate tonight with Julianne. You've humiliated me enough for one day just by existing in that room. Just go. Take your rattling car and your sad little life and leave me alone." Preston smirked, adjusted his gold cufflinks, and looked at me like I was a fly he was waiting for the maid to swat. The help usually exits through the rear. I looked for a flicker of the woman I'd married 4 years ago. She wasn't there. There was only a hollow shell dressed in emerald silk. If you were in my shoes, while facing a situation like this, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. The house in Oak Creek was silent when I arrived at 1:30 a.m. I didn't go to bed. I went to the small corner of the living room that served as my office. I pulled the chain on the desk lamp, the yellow light spilling over the stacks of invoices and bank statements I'd kept hidden for years. I logged into the secret account, $142,674.82. It was the result of 5 years of no. No to the new cars, no to the designer clothes. Clara thought we were struggling because I was a failure. In reality, I was a strategist. I began to print the statements. I highlighted the $2,000 deposits from weekend coding and $5,000 from consulting. I also printed Clara's personal account, the one I paid off every month, highlighting the $800 boutique charges. I put all the papers into a manila folder and wrote, "The cost of admission." By 4 a.m., my half of the house was empty. At 5:30 a.m., I heard a luxury engine in the driveway. Clara stumbled in, her hair disheveled, her emerald dress stained with red wine. She saw the suitcases by the door and stopped, blinking slowly. "What is this?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep and alcohol. "Are you finally taking the hint? Are you moving into a shelter?" I stood up from the kitchen table. I was still wearing the gray suit. "I'm leaving, Clara. The papers are on the table." She walked over and looked at the manila folder. She scanned the bank statements, her voice suddenly sober. $140,000? Elias, you had this while I was crying about our mortgage? While I was embarrassed to show my face at my sister's wedding? "We don't have a mortgage, Clara. I paid the house off 6 months ago. I just didn't tell you because I knew you'd immediately try to take out a home equity loan to buy a boat for Marcus to laugh at. You mocked me. You told me not to stand near you. Well, you got your wish. You'll never have to stand near me again. Once Clara realized there was a pot of gold, she called in a shark of a lawyer, Silas Thorne. We met in a sterile conference room in downtown Atlanta. Thorne laughed when my lawyer offered a 50-50 split of the house. My client is entitled to half of that investment account, plus alimony for the emotional distress caused by his deception. My lawyer, Sarah, smiled. She played a recording from the wedding, the moment on the terrace. Go home, Elias. Why, take your rattling car and your sad little life. Then she showed text messages where Clara called me a loser and said she was seeking a replacement. In the state of Georgia, Sarah said calmly, intent and conduct matter. Sign the papers or we file the adultery and character defamation suit. Clara's face went white. She signed. While the divorce was winding down, I moved into a loft in the city. Within 6 months, Marcus's tech empire crumbled. The SEC started asking questions. I received a phone call one Tuesday evening. It was Julianne. Elias, Marcus is in trouble. The bank is freezing our accounts. We just need a bridge loan. $50,000. Julianne, I'm surprised, I said. I thought you didn't associate with people who shopped at vintage thrift stores. I'm currently too frugal to invest in crumbling empires. I call Preston. I hear he has a yacht. I hung up. The silence was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. The Sterling Heights estate was auctioned off shortly after. I went to the auction wearing a bespoke charcoal wool suit. I saw Arthur there. He looked 10 years older. You were right, Elias. I built a house of cards and I let my daughters live in the attic. Now the wind is blowing. It's never too late to start over, Arthur. But you have to stop looking at the labels and start looking at the people. I didn't bid on anything. I didn't need their ghosts. Clara reached out one last time, sending a rambling email about finding herself and asking for dinner. I knew what that dinner would be, an attempt to see if there was any of that $140,000 left. I deleted the email and changed my settings. I was done being a character in her drama. I took the old slate gray suit to a local charity center. It's for a man who's starting from nothing. I told the man at the counter. Tell him it's lucky. Tell him the man who wore it before him learned how to be invisible until he was ready to be seen. Today, I own a small consulting firm with 4 employees. We have a clean space with good coffee and a culture of respect. I met a woman named Elena. She's a teacher. The first time we went out, I wore jeans and a flannel shirt. She didn't look at my clothes, she looked at my eyes. When I told her about the wedding, she didn't ask how much was left. She asked, how did you manage to stay so quiet for so long? That must have been lonely. That's when I knew she was the one. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story, and share your thoughts in the comments. That wedding was the best thing that ever happened to me. Clara's cruelty was a gift. It was the family secret that set me free. Every time they mocked me, they were actually giving me permission to leave. I still have a photo from that night. I look miserable, but in my eyes, you can see the spark of a man who has just realized he's holding all the cards. If you feel like the underdressed person in the room, remember this. Your value is not in your fabric. Your value is in your vision. Let them mock you. Build your kingdom in the dark, and by the time they realize you're the king, you'll be far beyond their reach. Thank you for staying with me through the darkest parts of my journey. If you found strength in this story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my channel, Kina Family Secrets and Revenge. It helps us bring more stories of resilience and justice to light. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been judged for your appearance? I read every single comment, and I'm honored to have you as part of this community. Thank you for watching, and remember, never let someone else's mirror define who you are. Until next time.